Afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with me, Kevin Ritz, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, where we aim to add value to people's lives. You can listen to us live every Wednesday and Thursday at lunchtime on ebizradio.com and all your major podcast channels today. If you're seeing this and listening to this, I want to challenge you to add value to someone's life today. We certainly can do with more value add to people's lives and be kinder to one another, guys. With that in mind, in today's marketing leadership segment, joining me as per usual, marketing communications expert and co-host, Craig Paisley. How you doing, Craig?
Hello, Kevin. Yeah, good to be chatting again. Thoroughly enjoying the backdrop images that you're using currently.
I'm supporting it. I think November should be let's support the spirit of the rugby World Cup
Success.
win.
Yes, I like that. Yes, the unity that the success brings. Cool.
And I think I've even some of the hashtags that I've been using on my social media has, I think I mentioned to you last week, so what about the American dream? How about the South African dream?
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the other sports happening in the world right now, like the world, I think it's the women's hockey champions are right up there in number one. I think there's people going to South Africans going to the Olympics.
Yes.
There's
Men and women's hockey team.
men and women. There's women's rugby that's doing really well. There's a whole array of South Africans. Someone actually made a meme about it, where sheep shearing. They had a competition in New Zealand with sheep shearing from two South Africans, and two South Africans beat the New Zealanders at sheep shearing.
Oh, that's bloody brilliant.
They were making a TikTok going, guys, let's stop beating up on
I'm gonna look out for that
New Zealanders because they're feeling a bit bad.
Yeah, but Kevin, can you believe we've got, including this week that we're in, we've got 6 weeks left before we actually wrap up and go and on annual leave in the middle of December. And when trying to establish how long we've got for work ahead of us, I actually saw that we'll end the year on our 140th show in that week, commencing 11 December.
Man, Craig, that's pretty spectacular, right? I remember last year we celebrated the same because it's the only time we do take a break. Like come hell or high water, holidays or not, we we make this show happen. This is other than my car. This is the most successful thing I'm doing in my life right now.
That's great. I love it.
Craig, so as we start today's show, don't you want to give us a reminder of last week's conversation?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. We definitely had a fascinating conversation last week when we reviewed a white paper titled Top 5 Trends in Sustainable Banking. The paper was published by Ecolytic at the end of 2022 and covered an overview of sustainable banking and practice. The 5 top trends that were in the report are noted as follows. Trend 1 is carbon footprinting and embedded finance. We note that the times of traditional banking are over as consumers are seriously looking for sustainability in all aspects of their lives, and naturally that includes for their bank accounts. Trend 2 is increasing customer lifetime value through a next level customer experience. And what we learn here is that the new generation of features can increase customer lifetime value and reduce churn towards new digital challenges in the industry, whether it be a green bank account or an embedded sustainability feature such as transaction-based environment footprinting or ESG investment platforms. These kind of customer experiences are definitely set to grow through 2023 into 2024. Trend 3 is encouraging sustainable behavior change that lasts. Banks know that wallets are a powerful tool in the fight against climate change, and by integrating environmental transparency into the banking experience, customers begin to align their financial expenditure with their carbon budgets and footprints. Trend 4 is hyper-personalizing sustainability. Personal financial data needs to be paired with, number 1, climate insights and change, number 2, educational content that really pulls you in and inspires, and number 3, fun facts that retain you in the headspace. The benefits are that when banks respond to the growing demand for better customer-facing experiences, consumers will definitely start adapting their lifestyles for the better. And finally, trend 5, making claims that matter. Key point here. The nature of consumption is shifting, and so are consumers' expectation towards brands and business. And as the demand for genuine and transparent corporate sustainability management rises, so does the risk of falling into that greenwashing trap with detrimental effects for businesses. And according to research, 48% of customers would buy as little as possible from a business that greenwashed, and only 40%, and up to 40% wouldn't return or recommend that brand to friends or family. And those are the reminder points from last week, Kevin.
Fantastic, guys. And if you want to go and check that out, we'll be chatting about corporate sustainability. It's on the YouTube channel and on all your major podcast channels. Just check out the lunchtime series. The conversation is there. Fascinating conversation on how we can support, or how currently certain industries and corporates or organizations are actually supporting sustainability and climate change. Craig, so what are we going to be discussing today?
Kevin, so we're moving away from the sort of the series on brands and sustainability to another important topic that really warrants this conversation, that being the topic of the Great Gloom. I don't know if you've heard the concept, but there's a growing concern that employee happiness is on a downward trend around the world, which is in reality at lower levels actually than during the height of the pandemic, Kevin. And I came across a fantastic report on fastcompany.com titled Manager's Guide to the Great Gloom, which notes that the end of the Great Resignation is in place and the rise of the Great Gloom is on the rise as workers globally are struggling with remote options, job choices, and record inflation. And yes, this is a global phenomenon, Kevin.
I haven't heard of the actual Great Gloom, Craig, but I can say, working with clients and working closely with large organizations, there is a sentiment and a sort of a feeling that you get from that, from people's feedback. But in the work that I do, I'm always coaching people out of the gloominess and kind of going, guys,
yes, true,
more ability and capability, and you are more able and actively involved in creating your day's happiness and what today looks like. And we are more capable than we think we are. And that's the thing where we really tap into from a coaching perspective, of really giving people tools to manage that a lot better and really be responsible for your emotional state. But I mean, I'm really interested in what this conversation is, because it's I do think there is an underlying gloom, and with the world wars happening in the way that it is,
yes,
the escalation of or every single price rising that inflation can possibly throw at is happening. I'm like, people were complaining about the price of eggs just recently. Like when did eggs get this expensive, right? And it is. It's. I think it's all a culmination of this conversation. But I'm interested, Craig. So, is there a link between the Great Resignation and the Great Gloom?
Yeah, Kevin, let me put some context to the various terms around this, and I think that'll help us get to understand if any link exists there. So probably the most recognizable of the terms is the one you've just started with, the Great Resignation. And this, according to Wikipedia, is also known as the Big Quit or the Great Reshuffle. There's a bit of a movie theme in that, probably. There's an ongoing economic trend in which employees have voluntarily resigned from their jobs en masse, beginning in early 2021. In the wake of the COVID pandemic. So, folk stepped in, looked at the mirror, did some internal introspection, and decided that time to move out of the jobs they had. So that was the Great Resignation. Then, of course, according to Personia.com, quiet quitting is when employees continue to put the minimum amount of effort in to keep their jobs, but don't go the extra mile for the employer. And this might mean not speaking up in meetings, not volunteering for tasks, and actually refusing to work overtime. And it also might be the result of great absenteeism. Then, according to iOfficeCorp.com, again, looking at quiet quitting, they state that it's a softer approach than the outright leaving a job. So substituting the Great Resignation for quiet quitting, the term isn't literal, but a play on words. Rather than workers quiet quitting jobs, they're actually quitting the idea of going above and beyond. Unhappy with some aspect of their current company or role, they choose to complete the bare minimum. Then moving on to the Great Gloom, according to fastcompany.com, The Great Gloom highlights the fact that employees are no longer riding the highs and lows of their roles, but instead shifted to resignation and apathy. And the true problem with employee engagement isn't a lack of motivation, but an absolute true disconnect between the employee and the organization's purpose, Kevin.
Correct, but don't you think also? I mean, and I'm just throwing a statement out there, but don't you think there's to a degree there's an unrealistic expectation of what organizations are expecting from their employees based on the fact that inflation is what it is, and things cost what they cost, and right now everyone's struggling. Everyone's doing what they can to cope with what they can, but yet there's still targets to meet, and so I'm not in the position to ask people, aren't you being a little bit uh, ridiculous, in terms of what it is you're expecting, but it's a very fine line, I think.
It is, and it's a great question, and it does, the content we're going to share shortly does allude to some of that, because there are definitely different components of workers that are facing harder struggles. So frontline workers, you talk about making sure the sales are there. The frontline workers are the guys dealing with the disgruntled customers, complaining about costs, complaining about service and things like that. And they're really at the front end of taking on that particular negative perception around what's happening in the world. And it's really hard for those folk to stay engaged and stay positive. And for me, the critical thing is if our listeners can take this entire conversation looking at it through the lens of a brand or a marketing department, and the direct negative impact that it has, and individuals working within those departments, when taking into account all of these issues that the current state and turmoil of the world has presented, Kevin.
Yeah, it's I just find that it is something that is sort of underlying a lot. But also, there's a concept where Arbiter Institute of Leadership shares that inward outward mindset. All right.
Yes.
With the outward mindset, you're dealing with people, but with an inward mindset, you're just a bunch of objects that need to meet my targets. And it's that fine line of like, do the shareholders and the people in charge see their teams as people, or do they see them as objects that need to meet the target? And I think that again is another conversation that leadership needs to be having.
Yeah, and I have alluded to this in the past, saying that there needs to be a time for a great reset. Shareholders just need to take caution and pause for a while, and you cannot expect 30%, 30% compounded annual growth year on year on year in industries which are really constrained by inflation and financial challenges. It's just impossible.
Yeah. Craig, so how do employees identify these disengaged employees?
Yeah, Kevin. So a good reference, a good question there, and directly in response to that question, I want to reference the article I mentioned a short while ago, again titled "The Manager's Guide to the Great Gloom." The article was written by Jen Lim and was published to fastcompany.com's Leadership Now section on 31 October 2023. So you can see this is a really current hot topic that we're addressing. The article opens with the following introduction, and there's 4 key points that come out here. Just when we thought the great workplace trends were behind us, say hello to the Great Gloom. We've been on a workplace trends roller coaster ride of highs and lows, and now the ominous spectre of the Great Gloom looms, signaling a significant decline in employee engagement, falling at a rate 10 times faster than the previous 3 years, Kevin.
Sure.
So why are employees so glum? Well, they're no longer riding the highs and lows, as we noted, but instead, they shifted to this resignation and apathy mindset. And the true problem with employee engagement isn't this lack of motivation, but the disconnect between employee and organization's purpose. Unfortunately, when employees struggle to find where the work fits into their desired world, the result is disengaged teams, costing the global economy, take note, $8.8 trillion annually. And with such high stakes, it's important to spot the signs of disengaged employees and understand the tools to re-engage workers, Kevin.
Quick, but like as you mentioning it, as you're speaking through it now, this, I mean, it makes significant sense to me on why this is happening. Because at COVID, people reevaluated their own value system and kind of said, what is it that I value and what is it that I don't value? And that has also, shifted the narrative of finding, like, do I want to work in this company? Don't I want to work in this company? And slowly but surely, I think a large impact to that is since COVID, um, organizations have changed, right?
Yes.
But policies and procedures and the work ethic and the way about work hasn't changed. They're still trying to fit the old models and old school way of working into today's capacity and today's mindset. And people have changed. People are expecting more. People are wanting to work in an environment where they know they are looked after and appreciated and recognized. And that speaks to the six human needs. Like, am I significant? Do I have security and certainty here? Do I get growth out of what I'm doing? And if those needs are not met, people will be gloomy. People will resign. People will just be completely apathetic and not engaged.
And Kevin, it really builds on a theme we covered in all three of the topics on sustainability, where it's the alignment of personal values. Firstly, at a brand level, what does the brand stand for, and what are the values that draw consumers to the brand, and do those values of the organization behind the brand align with the values of the consumer in mind? And very much that was driving a lot of the decisions on making sustainable purchases or not. That is definitely, a deep rooted truth of any organization.
Yeah.
Are the values of the organization aligned with the values of the employee, and what value does the business bring to the employees, and what value does the employee bring to the organization? And I'm doing quite a bit of work around employee brand at the moment, and employee value proposition, and that really sits at the root of a lot of those conversations, Kevin. But the
Absolutely.
article notes three areas, or the three R's of employee disengagement. So let's take a look at these in a bit more detail. So the first R is reduction in productivity and quality. And the connection between hard work and high rewards is now theoretically broken, where deadlines are missed, when simple mistakes aren't caught, and when the numbers really start lagging. You spoke about the pressure on sales targets. But Kevin, it's unfortunately easy to look past these particular aspects and blame laziness, loss of motivation, and even shoddy work, all behaviors that were exacerbated by the pandemic. Another area where the pressures were felt and productivity declined was, as I mentioned earlier, really with the frontline workers. And we learned that frontline workers were pushed to forego their physical and mental health while being driven to deliver better business as usual. And the net result is that output per hour decreased by 2.7% in the first quarter of this year, Kevin, the sharpest decline in 75 years. The biggest concern is that workers aren't feeling a sense of purpose in their work. They are unable to see that alignment between the values or connections to what matters most. As I mentioned, a point that we've definitely picked up over a few times the past few weeks. So instead of doing work to understand what a fulfilling life looks like, or to quote, employees opt to sit in stagnant water instead of being curious of what a new flow can bring. Then moving to the second R, which is that of refusing growth opportunities. Very important point this. It's true that many employees refuse growth opportunities and development when this happens, and their roles within the business then automatically die because they become less relevant. And unfortunately, this signals the fact that they no longer see a place for their own personal growth within that organization. And a real concern, which is emphasized in an ADP RI study, found that 77% of employees interviewed say that training is available, but only 40% actually took advantage of it. And then finally, the third R, Kevin, that is remaining silent. So when organizations don't create environments that offer physical safety, people's fear or judgment or retaliation, they then lack trust, and then they actually can't make moves for real change within their own lives. They unfortunately feel that their voice doesn't matter because it's been ignored in a culture that actually doesn't encourage open, honest communication. And this obviously leads to employees not expressing their thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
Craig, I mean, you mentioned curiosity earlier, and one of the leader skills that I, emphasize whenever we do any kind of leadership engagement is, around unconscious bias, around change, in your quotients that you look in leadership, from your spiritual quotient, your physical quotient, your financial quotient, all these quotients that we know now exist and should be paying attention to. One of the key things is curiosity. And the more curious you are and the more curious you become around what it is you're doing and how your environment and your people are impacting your organization, the more you get out of them, and the more information, and the easier it becomes to step into a place of genuine interest instead of just going through the motions.
Yes.
Curiosity is a fantastic way of looking at leadership and changing your leadership. But I mean, Craig, what can employers do to re-engage their employees?
So the article moves from the 3 R's of employee disengagement to the 3 C's of employee re-engagement. And the first C here being one that we always talk about: communicate. But communicate with psychological safety in place in this instance. You probably do know this, but Google conducted a project about a decade ago titled Project Aristotle, and the intention was to understand what makes a successful team. And the research concluded that the most critical factor was psychological safety. The teams that felt safe to take risks, have authentic conversations, and can be vulnerable with each other, they were the most successful. And it's not about asking what's happening in your employees' lives. It is. It's about asking what's happening in your employees' lives beyond their workload. It's about providing that safe space for real talk about where your employees are mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and purposefully. And that talks directly to those leadership quotients that you're talking about. It's about providing the space to express, without fear of judgment or repercussion, how they really feel and what they need to show up as their best selves to do their best work. And I know you cover these points quite well in your book, Kevin.
Yeah.
The second C is that of reconnect. And we know how important it is to connect employees' purpose and values to the organization. And a way to do this is just lead an exercise to identify as individuals' purpose first before promoting them up through the company. When individuals do it for themselves and the team share, there's an immediate alignment in what connects employees, not just co-workers, but as human beings. So for employers, help the team feel more connected to purposeful work by highlighting the individual contributions that ladder up to the organization's greater mission. Check in with the teams to see how the individual purpose might be better tied into the bigger roles and tasks. And then the final C, which is culture. It's important to ensure that the company culture is true to its values and that it demonstrates the walk, the talk in every single instance, Kevin. We know that all organizations have values and that they're embedded across every aspect of the workplace, from hiring to promotions and even to layoffs. But the values of the organization's North Star, that guiding light to show the path and plan, make sure the North Star is on and not tarnished. And when the values are aligned with tangible, codified behaviors that are consistently rewarded, take note: autonomy, alignment, accountability, and authentic relationships happen. And the closing point here is that the emergence of the Great Gloom doesn't have to permeate across the organization, Kevin. By taking notice of the signs of employee disengagement and intentionally nurturing an environment with communication, connection, and culture, employers can worry less about the gloom and support more of the positive behaviors, Kevin.
Craig, but I mean, I'm glad that you end on culture, because the famous Peter Drucker quote says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast,"
Yep.
right? So if the culture doesn't support what the strategy is doing, if the culture is not the foundation of the organization, and it's safe and it's looked after to that degree, your strategy almost becomes redundant. It's like you need the people to buy into the culture of who you are and what you're doing, else it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
What other industries have the most unhappy employees, Craig? Because that would be quite interesting to also see. I can probably,
Yeah,
but I'm like,
absolutely. So I came across an article on hrdrive.com titled "Welcome to the Great Gloom. Employees seem unhappier than ever," and it provides an overview on employee unhappiness by sector. The article was written by Carolyn Crest and published on the 8th of September this year. Again, these things are very current topics. So a key paragraph states the following. Today's complex problems will require leaders to be proactive, adaptive, and data informed to beat back the Great Gloom. To succeed in a rapidly evolving world, businesses will need to prioritize employee experience in real, meaningful ways like never before. Bamboo HR, who conducted the research, analyzed employee satisfaction based on employee net promoter score, this being how likely employees are to recommend their organizations as a place of work. And they surveyed 57,000 global workforces across 8 key industries. And the findings note that the unhappiest workers were actually, unsurprisingly, in healthcare and education industries. These obviously, Kevin, being affected heavily by the pandemic. Take note of some of the stats here. Healthcare employees' happiness dropped 32% between June 2020 and June 2023, with half of that drop occurring in 2023 alone, Kevin.
Yeah.
Education employee happiness dropped 5% between June 2022 and 23, or twice as fast as the previous 2 years. Non-profit and travel hospitality employee happiness increased slightly during 2023, but still ranks at its overall low level. Restaurant, food, and beverage employee happiness scores dropped 31% since June 2020. There are a few signs of recovery there. Technology industries, employee happiness experienced a significant drop, about 3.5 times faster in 2023 than previous years. And we know the mass retrenchments happening across the big tech companies. The finance industry employee happiness saw a less significant drop, but still are volatile as workers are reacting to more layoffs, bank closures, and less available capital. Construction industry employees seem to be happiest at the moment. Just there's a high demand, which is creating more job stability and higher wages. And yeah, in closing on this particular sector point, average happiness scores have remained steady throughout 2023.
But Craig, I mean, not to blatantly promote the book that I wrote, but essentially, so, for the work and industry neutral growth skills, social intelligence is a key critical factor to the future of work, right? So if you look at social intelligence, you kind of go, okay, so do you have the intelligence to understand the impact that your environment, your business, your company is having on the people who work there? Because if you're not socially equipped or adapting to that degree, you're just going to have unhappy people, and I think we're so obsessed with this AI situation that we're actually forgetting that the humans behind running organizations is missed, and what humans need at the end of the day. And if you look at these stats, you kind of go, that's going to be I think the human element of organizations is going to be part of the edge that companies have. That companies are going to thrive when they're actually looking after their people, and they make their people priority number one.
Yeah.
That's going to be the cutting sort of edge of organizations into the future. And to tie to that is like last week's conversations, companies that support, climate change and are actively involved in making the world a better place. Those are the market leaders that the future is going to have. And if you listen to this conversation, it's quite clear that something needs to be done, and the way that people, organizations, and leaders are making decisions, and especially healthcare and education. It's part of the most important sectors of the world, and they're the unhappiest, but them the most. You're kind of going, well, like, we have a problem, guys.
but the reality is, so you don't want to flog your book. The reality is that there are a lot of concepts in your book that just talk directly to these incredibly critical, important points for leaders.
And that's why I'm so glad that we're having them printed. They should be out and online by the end of the month. So as soon as it is, I'm going to actively promote it and get people just to understand the concept of what the work and industry neutral growth skills look like. Because when you get the basic concept of it, you can actively start implementing necessary areas of concern. And I mean, it speaks to exactly this point of like really critically thinking around your business, being creative about it. What's the social intelligence? What's the self-management? And what is the attention? Just the priority, the prioritization of people, just that could be an attention managed position that you take within your organization. It's just a well-rounded, very effective way of handling this situation, for example.
Yes.
But I mean, Craig, as we end today's show, what are the key takeaway points for the listeners today?
Kevin, so I want to reference a LinkedIn article that I came across titled Great Gloom Follows Great Resignation with Unhappy Employers, and use that for takeaway points. The article was written by Lynn Williams and was published again as recently as the 5th of October 2023. The article notes the following key takeaways for HR professionals. Use data-driven approaches to measure employee happiness through anonymous surveys, your Net Promoter Scores. Focus on industry-specific norms to understand how macroeconomic challenges are impacting the different sectors. Employee happiness reached an all-time low in June 2023, depicting atypical patterns similar to the early months of pandemic. Employees are experiencing resignation or apathy rather than extreme highs and lows. HR professionals can play a crucial role in improving employee engagement by setting clear goals, providing recognition, and having meaningful conversation with employees to minimize the great gloom. Resilient companies should focus on workforce agility, capability, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. They should listen to employees' views, offer flexible work arrangements, and provide training and career development programs. And ultimately, employers may need to shift their focus from perks to strategies emphasizing employee strengths and goals to improve engagement effectively. The article then notes the following key takeaway for employers. If you're an employer and don't want to lose valuable employees, consider what moves you should make to increase employee happiness. A study by SHRM notes that the average hire cost is almost $4,700 and the average workplace learning cost is $1,280 per employee. It's obviously making more sense to ensure employee happiness and retain and train staff as opposed to trying to replace the staff. Budgets will typically clear at the beginning of each year, so expectations are that employees will be engaged in measured hiring in Q4. Hiring may depend on how many people have left or intend resigning before they receive their potential year-end bonus. But on this point, we note all too well, Kevin, unhappy employees may well wait for their bonus payments and then move on. So you could just again see that spike of resignations coming through January, February, and in the following year. And those are the key takeaway points for today's show.
Fantastic, Craig. I think it's a very important conversation, and I'm glad we're doing it at this part of the year. So maybe it's part of a strategy for the new year to kind of really look at who we are, where we are, and how does 2024 look different. Sean Acor's quote says, "We not only need to work happy, we need to work at being happy."
Oh, beautiful.
And I have two quotes. The other one, which I think is really, really significant, is whoever's happy will make others happy too. And Anne Frank said that.
Wow.
And that's the truth, right? Because happiness doesn't start with other people. It starts with me, right? So to all the leaders out there, to all the organizations making big decisions, if you're happy, ask yourself, how do you share that? How do you get to share that happiness with your people? And are you doing it effectively? And are you intentionally doing it?
And again, I go back to the view of the lens through marketers or brands. When you have happy workers in a happy brand environment, there's no doubt that you're going to meet all the objectives of what consumers are looking for. You'll have happy consumers. At the end of the day, a better bottom line, and you'll have happy shareholders.
Absolutely. I love that. Craig, thank you so much for today's conversation, guys. It's the Great Gloom we're talking about. You can catch it live on all your WhatsApp channels, all your podcast channels, and on YouTube every week, every Thursday, and live on ebizradio.com. Craig, thank you so much. Have a fantastic week, and I'll